All events have finally calmed down and I would like to talk. I am a 40 years old divorced woman and work to support my children. My husband passed away a year ago. My daughter is not here and I live with my son. I met my husband 25 years ago when we were still in high school. My husband and I were in the same high school class. However, we didn't have much contact with each other, and I don't think we talked much until our sophomore year. The first time we started talking was at a ball game tournament in our junior year. I am not good at sports in general, and ball games were my least favorite event. However, since everyone had to participate, I had to take part in any one of EVNC's. When I talked to a good friend of mine about it, she said, "If you play softball outfield, you don't have to move." So I chose softball. Most of the softball team members were boys who belonged to a baseball club and girls were good at playing sports. Therefore, I remember I was very nervous on the day of the event. However, as my friends had told me, the ball hardly flew to me at all at first. So I was very happy on the inside. Of course, I had no sense as a batter, so I don't remember having hit the ball. However, there was a captain of a baseball club in my team, so we were winning by a large margin. However, at last the ball flew into the outfield. It was obviously me who was closest to where the ball would fall. I was trying my best to get it, but honestly, I didn't feel like I could take it. At that moment, one of the boys who couldn't stand looking at me came running up behind me. He then set my glove above my head and said, "Don't move your hand. If you move in the direction I say, you can take it," he said. I followed his instruction and held my glove at my head and waited for the ball. Then the ball landed in my glove. I still vividly remember how happy I was at that moment. I was too busy taking the ball to check, but the boy who helped me was the captain of the baseball club. I was so happy to get the ball that the boy gently said to me, "Nice catch." That was very good. I remember I was very happy. And after that, the softball team was able to win thanks to the hard work of the baseball club members and others. Afterwards, I called out to the boy who helped me. "Thank you for helping me. You are indeed the captain of the team. You were very good." Then the boy said happily, "I love baseball, but you made a really nice catch. I couldn't have done it without you. We are in the same class, so let's talk a lot from now on." "All right," said the boy. "I've always wanted to get to know you too." I wondered what he said and asked him again. "What? I don't talk so much in class, and I didn't think someone like you would know me." "I know. You are in the brass band, right? I did my best at a summer tournament this year, thanks to your performance to cheer us up." No, there are about 10 members of the brass band in our class." "I know, but I really wanted to talk to you." "I see. Well then, we'll only be here for another 6 months, but I'm looking forward to talking to you." After this one ball game, we began to talk frequently, and I learned a lot about him. He has been playing baseball since elementary school and knows everything about baseball. He plays baseball so much that he can't study as much as he would like. He is worried that he might not be able to play baseball after graduating from high school. I remember that his stories were very interesting, even though they were mostly baseball related. Then, on Christmas Eve, 2 months after the ball game, I had to leave the music room after 6:00 p.m. because the brass band had a concert and I had not finished cleaning up. And as I was leaving the school gate, he was waiting for me. And he confessed to me, "Actually, I've always liked you. If you like, will you go out with me?" I remember I was very happy to hear his words, and I immediately replied, "Of course. Let's keep in touch." and we started dating on Christmas Eve. After graduating from high school, we both started to work. My husband had been offered a recommendation from a strong baseball university, but he turned it down, prioritizing his life with me. I think it was about a year after I started working that I heard about this. I sometimes felt very guilty about his quitting baseball for me, but I didn't say anything to my husband because it was his decision. My husband and I joined different companies in same state. Then, when we turned 21, we got married, and the following year, I gave birth to our first son. I took maternity leave and devoted myself to raising our child. After that, I thought about going back to my old company, but my husband said to me, "Work is important, but now that you have a child, I want you to concentrate on housework." I became a full-time housewife after that. We were both very nervous about the birth of our first child, but I remember being very excited. Then, 1 year after the birth of my son, I gave birth to my daughter. I was used to giving birth to my son, and I remember that I delivered my daughter without panicking at all. As was the case with my son, I still vividly remember that when I heard my daughter's birth voice at the hospital, I cried with joy. My husband worked at a nearby factory and was not very well paid. But we were living a very happy life at that time. Then my son entered elementary school. My husband was a baseball player in an industrial league, and my son, who had seen him practice baseball a few times. When he entered elementary school, he said, "I want to play baseball." My husband was so pleased that my son decided to join the elementary school baseball club. My daughter also wanted to join some kind of club as soon as she entered elementary school, and as a result of looking at various things, she started attending piano lessons in front of the station. I remember I was very happy because I also played an instrument in the brass band, although it is not piano. My husband was so happy that our son started playing baseball that he started teaching him when he came home after work. As a result, baseball practice with my husband and son went on until late at night, and dinner time was often late. However, both my son and my husband seemed to be enjoying themselves, and I remember watching them with a smile on my face. As these days went by, we had to pay for our son's baseball equipment, our daughter's piano lessons, and other living expenses, which gradually became impossible to cover on my husband's salary alone. So I decided to rejoin the company I had worked for before the birth of my child. I asked one of the people at the company, "May I work one more time?" I asked, and one of my old coworkers said, "We'd love to have you." And I started working. My daughter's piano school was about 30 minutes away by car. So until I started working, I had dropped and picked her up every time. However, when I started working, I could no longer drop and pick her up. I tried asking my husband, but he refused, saying he was busy with our son's practice. I talked to my daughter about it. "I'm sorry. I won't be able to pick you up from your piano lessons. Will you find something else to do?" "Sure, I understand. I've been thinking about quitting too." "Oh, really? If that's the case, that's fine. I'm really sorry." Or don't apologize. It's okay. And my daughter immediately stopped taking piano lessons. No one, including my daughter, expected that this would lead to a change in my daughter's personality and even to a major incident. At this time, it was my husband who had the most authority in the house. Therefore, the rhythm of our life always depended on my husband and son's baseball practice. Sometimes my son and my husband ate dinner, even if my daughter had not come home from school to study or other activities. There was even a mysterious rule that even if the daughter had plans, If the son had a game, the whole family would always go together to cheer him on. As her husband and son's lives became more and more centered, the daughter gradually stopped talking at home and became more and more patient. My husband and son, of course, concentrated on baseball, and I worked to earn a living, so I think I did not listen to my daughter as much as I should have. Then a few years passed, and my son became a junior high school student. Of course, my son joined the baseball team at junior high school and practiced even harder than in elementary school. A year later, my daughter also entered junior high school. My daughter said she did not have anything she wanted to do at that time, probably because she had to endure most of her elementary school years because of her older brother's baseball activities. Therefore, I think that she did not join club activities, went home as soon as classes were over, and often stayed in her room. I was indeed concerned and approached my daughter, but she said, "There are no club activities I want to join at the moment." I did not ask her deeply about it. My son's enthusiasm for baseball grew even stronger, and my husband's enthusiasm for him seemed to grow even stronger in response. When my son entered the 3rd grade of junior high school, he hit many home runs in major tournaments in the prefecture and became a well-known player in the state. Perhaps because of this, my son received a recommendation from a high school that was said to be a strong baseball team. My husband and I were very, very happy at that time, and I remember making a big dinner for him. My son was also happy that he could further pursue his passion for baseball. So he took the entrance examination for the high school and was admitted. Since he entered the high school with a recommendation, he was exempted from all tuition fees, but it cost more money than expected for dormitory fees, travel expenses, and the purchase of baseball equipment. I remember that by the time our son entered high school 1 year later, we were barely making ends meet with my husband's and my earnings combined. 1 year after my son entered high school, my daughter failed to get into the right high school she had been aiming for and ended up going to a private high school that she had taken as a second choice. Of course, since it was a private school, the enrollment fee alone was just barely what our family could afford to pay then. Therefore, in addition to my work at the company, I began to work at home, and I think I was desperate to make money. It was at that time that a further mishap occurred. The company that owned the factory where my husband worked was restructured, and the factory where he worked also went out of business. After that, my husband lost the will to work. He did not look for a job, and he started drinking alcohol every day, which he had not been drinking before. Since my husband was no longer earning money, it was difficult for me to earn money on my own, so I sometimes had to beg my parents for help. I remember that I spent most of my days cutting back on my sleeping hours, working at the office during the day, and doing some kind of inside work when I returned home. One day, my daughter, seeing my lifestyle, said to me, "I don't want to go to high school, I want to work." I remember that these words made me feel very sad because I thought that she was worried about me because of my appearance. Then I gently said to my daughter, "If it's money you're worried about, don't worry about it. It's not your fault. So why don't you go to high school and study hard?" She said, "I'm not worried about you or anything. I want to work and be independent as soon as possible. But how many companies will take a junior high graduate? It doesn't matter, I'll work anyway." I couldn't argue with those words anymore, so I agreed, and my daughter quit high school after a year in. After that, my daughter could not find a job, so she started working part-time. My daughter went to work early in the morning and usually returned home at night. I felt very guilty at this time because of my daughter. I remember that there were times when I cried quietly alone at night, regretting that if we had more money and did not cause my daughter anxiety, she would have been able to go to high school without worries. Even then, my husband still drank excessively every day. My husband drank and said to me as I was doing an inside job, "You don't make more money, so the kids can't go to school without worries." He was often drunk and would throw things around. My husband probably felt a sense of emptiness because his son had entered a dormitory and there was nothing he could do for himself anymore, and he was also angry that he had been forced to quit his job. I remember seeing his attitude and not being able to get angry with him and just apologizing to him. Occasionally, he would throw something at me, and the bruises on my face would continue to increase. However, even under such circumstances, my son was doing well in baseball, so I tried my best to hide this family environment from him. A few months after my daughter started working, my husband, who had been drinking at home, suddenly had difficulty breathing. I immediately called an ambulance and he was taken to the hospital. Later, a tumor was found in his throat and surgery was performed to cut open his trachea in a hurry. My husband's condition was so severe that even after the tumor was removed, his symptoms did not improve and he had to live his life on a ventilator. After a month of hospitalization, I was taught how to use a ventilator by the hospital staff, and he was able to receive medical care at home. Although I learned how to use the ventilator in general, I also received instruction on how to respond when phlegm came out, etc. At that time, and my daughter and I took care of my husband together. I would go to work during the day to earn our living expenses. At that time, my daughter was taking care of my husband. Even though my husband had made her feel very uncomfortable during her elementary school days, for example, when she quit piano lessons, my daughter took care of him without a single look of disapproval. I remember that I was very happy to see her like that. My son also frequently came home on holidays to check on my husband. I still remember that my husband was very happy when I told him about my son's baseball game in high school. Then one day when I came home after work, I heard my daughter giggling in the living room in a loud voice I had never heard before. I became suspicious and asked my daughter, "What's wrong? Laughing like that?" My daughter was laughing the whole time, as if she couldn't hear me. I was concerned about my husband's condition, so I went to his room to check on him. Then I heard an alarm beeping from my husband's ventilator. I didn't know what was going on, so I went closer and saw that the ventilator had been removed from my husband's mouth. I panicked and checked my husband's breathing, but he was not breathing. I think I was fumbling around, not knowing what to do. From the living room, I could hear my daughter's gibbering laughter the whole time, and I immediately called an ambulance. Then my husband was carried away. I was so flustered by the sudden event that my memory of this time is only hazy. Then I asked my daughter, "What happened? Why was the ventilator off?" But my daughter did not answer me at that time, just laughing. I think I was suspicious that my daughter had something to do with it because there was no one at home but my daughter and my husband. Then my husband was rushed to the hospital and immediately underwent surgery, but as a result, he passed away. I cried in the hospital, unable to accept my husband's sudden death. Later, my son also rushed to the hospital, but I think he saw me crying and sensed it. So he didn't say anything and just let the tears flow. My son stayed with me until the next morning, but he left saying he had to go to school. I went home where my daughter was alone. I still remember the doctor said he must have had difficulty breathing because the ventilator had been off for so long. I therefore strongly questioned my daughter. You know something, don't you? Why was your father's ventilator off? My daughter remained expressionless and did not speak. I knew I would never get anywhere with her, so I called the police. The police asked her, "Did you remove the ventilator from your father?" The daughter finally opened her mouth and honestly confessed, "I did it." After that, the daughter began to talk as if she was trying to get it all out. I saw my father beat my mother. I saw the bruises on her body, and I heard the cracking noises. I thought if only my father were gone, none of this would ever happen again. And besides, he was always talking about my brother and never looking at me. He's a good baseball player, and he went to high school on recommendation, and I think he's great, but I wish you had paid more attention to me. I could only nod in agreement with my daughter's words. I wanted to play an instrument like you. Even though your work made it impossible, I still wanted to play an instrument, whatever it was. But I knew we didn't have enough money because of my brother, and I was poor at studying and went to a private high school, so I couldn't tell you. Besides, since my father stopped working, he drank a lot and didn't work. If only my father had left, you wouldn't have had to work so hard, doing homework and so on. His disease is a well-earned punishment. Why do we have to take care of him? It's impossible. I always wish my father would just go away. Hearing my daughter's inner thoughts, I knew how she felt and broke down crying. Then my daughter said in tears, "That's why I took off the ventilator." I couldn't stop sobbing because I was crying so much, but I said to my daughter in a small voice, "I knew exactly what you were thinking. It is true that what your father has done may have hurt you many times. I've caused you a lot of trouble too. I am so sorry. It's not your fault. It's all his fault. But you know, you can't kill someone no matter what. You can't do that." My daughter nodded quietly and said in a weak voice, "I'm sorry." I think my son, who was listening to my daughter's story, kept his mouth open and let his mind wander. She was then taken to the police station. After that, my husband's funeral was held. My husband had been drinking every day since he lost his job and was sometimes violent toward me, but he had never been such a person before. On the contrary, he worked aggressively at work and had a reputation for being kind. In addition, because he was on a baseball team, there were a lot of people who adored my husband. Many people who were indebted to such a husband came to the funeral, and my husband left for heaven, being watched over by everyone. Later, a trial was held to decide the daughter's sentence. I heard that there was a great deal of deliberation because she had killed her own father. As a result, it was decided that the crime was cruel, but she was mentally immature and should be placed in a juvenile reformatory. And my daughter was sent to a juvenile detention center. I try to visit her regularly. My son also visits her regularly, apparently. I regret that I didn't notice that my daughter was so mentally distressed that she wanted to kill my husband, and I feel that if I had rushed home immediately and taken him to the hospital before he died, she might not have been sent to a juvenile reformatory. I'm living with such feelings. Also, my son quit high school and started working so that his daughter could do what she wanted when she came out of juvenile reformatory. I later heard that my son had received a recommendation from a strong baseball university, and it was the same university that my husband had received a recommendation from when he was in school. I felt guilty about stopping my family from doing what they wanted to do, and I encouraged my son to go, but he declined, saying, "I've put up with my sister for so long, and it's not good for me to continue doing what I love." I knew that if my son had entered this college, My husband would have been very happy. However, my son has chosen this path for the sake of our family, and I would like to continue to support him. I can't imagine what life will be like from now on, but I will try to live with my son and daughter. That was a long story, but thank you for listening.